Imagine being trapped in a narrow canyon with your arm completely pinned by an 800-pound boulder, with no way to escape and no one knowing where you are. Now imagine being in this situation for 5 days and 7 hours, with no food, limited water, and the gradual realization that you have only one way out, a decision so extreme that most people would rather die than face it. This is exactly what happened to Aron Ralston, a 27-year-old mechanical engineer and experienced outdoorsman, whose weekend adventure in Utah's remote Blue John Canyon became one of the most shocking survival stories ever documented. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about human willpower, desperation, and the lengths someone will go to survive. The decision Aron made on that fifth day will leave you questioning whether you could ever find the courage to do what he did. Aron Ralston was not your typical weekend warrior. By 2003, at just 27 years old, he had already established himself as one of the most dedicated and skilled mountaineers in Colorado. Working as a mechanical engineer for Intel during the week, Aron lived for his weekends in the wilderness. His passion wasn't just casual hiking, he was systematically attempting to climb all 59 of Colorado's 14ers, the peaks that rise above 14,000 feet, and he was doing most of them solo. What set Aron apart from other outdoor enthusiasts was his meticulous approach to adventure combined with an almost reckless confidence in his abilities. He had been climbing and exploring canyons for over a decade, and he knew the risks involved in solo adventures. But he also believed deeply in his skills, his preparation, and his ability to handle whatever the wilderness might throw at him. This confidence had served him well through countless successful expeditions, but it also made him comfortable taking risks that more cautious adventurers might avoid. Aron's specialty was canyoneering, the art of traveling through canyons using a combination of hiking, climbing, rappelling, and swimming. The slot canyons of Utah were his playground, and he had explored dozens of them over the years. These narrow passages, carved by centuries of water flow, presented unique challenges and extraordinary beauty. They also presented unique dangers, as they were often remote, difficult to access, and completely cut off from outside communication. On April 26, 2003, Aron decided to spend the weekend exploring some of the more remote areas around Canyonlands National Park in Utah. His plan was to mountain bike to the trailhead, then hike and canyon through several interconnected slot canyons, including the infamous Blue John Canyon. It was supposed to be a routine weekend adventure, something he had done hundreds of times before. Aron's preparation for this trip was typical of his approach to solo adventures. He packed light but efficiently a single water bottle, some snacks, his climbing gear, a headlamp, and a small backpack. He had his video camera to document the journey, and he was wearing his favorite climbing clothes. What he didn't have was a detailed itinerary left with anyone else, and he hadn't told anyone exactly where he was going. This was part of the appeal for Aron, the complete freedom to explore without having to check in with anyone or follow a predetermined schedule. As he set off on his mountain bike that Saturday morning, Aron was in perfect physical condition and high spirits. The weather was ideal for canyoneering, and he was looking forward to exploring some areas he had never visited before. He had no way of knowing that this routine weekend adventure would become a test of human endurance that would push him far beyond any limits he had ever imagined. It was around 2:30 in the afternoon on Saturday, April 26th, when Aron's life changed forever. He was deep in Blue John Canyon, a narrow slot canyon approximately 20 miles southeast of the small town of Hanksville, Utah. The canyon walls towered above him, creating a natural corridor that was in some places only 3 feet wide. This was exactly the kind of technical terrain that Aron loved: challenging, beautiful, and completely isolated from the outside world. Aron was navigating a particularly narrow section of the canyon when he encountered a chockstone, a large boulder that had become wedged between the canyon walls. This was a common feature in slot canyons, and Aron had climbed over hundreds of similar obstacles during his years of canyoneering. The boulder appeared to be solidly wedged in place, approximately 800 pounds of sandstone that had been stuck there for who knows how long. As Aron began to climb over the boulder, using a technique he had perfected over years of canyon exploration, something went catastrophically wrong. The boulder, which appeared to be completely stable, suddenly shifted under his weight. In a split second, the massive stone dislodged and began to fall, and Aron's right arm was caught between the boulder and the canyon wall. The impact was immediate and devastating. The 800-pound boulder pinned Aron's right arm against the canyon wall, crushing bones and trapping him completely. The pain was excruciating, but even more terrifying was the immediate realization that he was stuck. The boulder was far too heavy for him to move, and its position against the canyon wall created a trap that seemed impossible to escape. Aron's first reaction was panic, followed quickly by a desperate attempt to free himself using brute force. He pushed against the boulder with his left arm, braced his feet against the canyon wall, and used every ounce of strength he possessed to try to shift the massive stone. But the boulder didn't budge even slightly. It was as if it had become a permanent part of the canyon wall, and Aron's arm was now permanently attached to it. As the initial shock wore off, Aron began to assess his situation with the methodical thinking that had served him well in previous outdoor emergencies. He was trapped in a remote canyon that few people ever visited. He had not told anyone his exact plans, so no one would know where to look for him. He had limited water and food, and he was facing what could be a very long wait for rescue. The psychological impact of those first few hours was almost as challenging as the physical pain. Aron had always been in control of his adventures, confident in his ability to handle whatever situations arose. Now, for the first time in his life, he was completely helpless, trapped by circumstances beyond his control and facing an uncertain future. As night fell on that first day, Aron realized that his weekend adventure had become something entirely different. He was no longer an adventurer exploring beautiful canyons. He was a trapped man fighting for his life in one of the most remote places on Earth. What do you think about Aron's situation so far? How would you have reacted in those first crucial hours when you realized you were completely trapped? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The second day brought the harsh reality of long-term survival in an impossible situation. Aron's right arm was not just trapped, it was completely crushed and had lost all circulation. The lack of blood flow meant that his hand and forearm were beginning to die, turning cold and eventually numb. But the psychological challenges were even more daunting than the physical ones. Aron established a routine that would become his lifeline over the coming days. Every morning, he would assess his physical condition, ration his limited water supply, and attempt various methods to free himself from the boulder. He tried using his climbing gear's levers. He attempted to chip away at the boulder with his multi-tool, and he even tried to break his own bones to create enough space to slip his arm free. The water situation became critical almost immediately. Aron had started with about 350 milliliters of water, barely enough for a normal day of hiking, let alone a survival situation. He rationed this precious liquid carefully, taking only small sips when absolutely necessary. But by the third day, his water was gone, and he was forced to make one of the most desperate decisions of his ordeal. He began drinking his own urine to stay hydrated. The psychological toll of isolation and desperation began to manifest in profound ways. Aron started having vivid hallucinations and conversations with imaginary rescuers. He would hear helicopters that weren't there, see people approaching who turned out to be shadows on the canyon walls, and experience moments of complete disorientation where he wasn't sure what was real and what was his mind playing tricks on him. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of Aron's ordeal was his decision to record video messages for his family and friends. Using his small digital camera, he documented his situation, his thoughts, and his gradual realization that he might not survive. These recordings, which were later used in the Hollywood film about his experience, provide an incredibly intimate look at a man facing his own mortality with remarkable clarity and courage. In these video messages, Aron spoke directly to his parents, his sister, and his friends, telling them how much he loved them and apologizing for the pain his death would cause them. He also used the camera to document his various attempts to escape, creating a record of his ingenuity and determination even in the face of seemingly impossible odds. By the fourth day, Aron's physical condition was deteriorating rapidly. He was severely dehydrated, had not eaten any substantial food in days, and was experiencing the early stages of kidney failure. His trapped arm was completely dead, and he was beginning to understand that even if he could somehow free himself, he would need immediate medical attention to survive. It was during this period that Aron began to seriously consider the unthinkable option that had been lurking in the back of his mind since the first day. He had a small, dull knife as part of his multi-tool, and he realized that amputation might be his only chance of survival. But the knife was inadequate for such a task, and Aron knew that attempting to cut through the bones of his arm would be virtually impossible with the tools he had available. Thank you so much for staying with us through this incredible and difficult journey so far. Aron's story is about to reach its most intense and shocking moment, and the best is yet to come. What happens next will test the limits of human courage. By the morning of Thursday, April 30th, his fifth day trapped in the canyon, Aron Ralston faced a reality that no human being should ever have to confront. His body was shutting down from dehydration and starvation. His trapped arm was completely necrotic, and he had exhausted every possible method of escape except one. The decision he was about to make would require a level of courage and determination that defies comprehension. Aron had been mentally preparing for this moment for days, but the actual decision to amputate his own arm came to him in a flash of clarity that he later described as almost supernatural. He realized that he could break the bones in his forearm and then use his dull knife to cut through the soft tissue. It would be agonizing, it would be dangerous, and it would require him to overcome every natural instinct for self-preservation, but it was his only chance of survival. The process began with Aron positioning himself to create maximum leverage against his trapped arm. Using his body weight and the canyon wall as a fulcrum, he began applying pressure to his forearm bones. The sound of his own bones breaking was audible in the quiet canyon, and the pain was indescribable. But Aron had moved beyond normal human responses to pain. He was operating on pure survival instinct and an iron will to live. Once he had broken both bones in his forearm, Aron began the horrific process of cutting through the soft tissue, tendons, and muscles that still connected his arm to his body. Using his small, dull knife, he methodically worked through each layer of tissue, fighting against waves of nausea, pain, and shock that threatened to overwhelm him. The entire process took approximately 1 hour, during which Aron had to maintain perfect focus and determination despite experiencing trauma that would have caused most people to lose consciousness. The most challenging part of the amputation was cutting through the main nerves in his arm, which produced electrical shocks of pain that shot through his entire body. Aron later described this sensation as being electrocuted from the inside, but he forced himself to continue because he knew that stopping meant death. When he finally severed the last connections and his arm came free, Aron experienced a moment of euphoria that was almost religious in its intensity. But his ordeal was far from over. Aron was now free from the boulder, but he was also severely injured, dehydrated, and still 7 miles away from his vehicle. He had to improvise a tourniquet to control the bleeding from his amputated arm, and he had to do it quickly before he lost consciousness from blood loss. Using his climbing gear and his remaining clothes, he created a makeshift bandage system that would keep him alive long enough to seek help. The psychological impact of what he had just accomplished was almost as overwhelming as the physical trauma. Aron had crossed a line that separates normal human experience from something almost superhuman. He had literally sacrificed part of his body to save his life, and he had done it with a clarity and determination that would inspire people around the world. As he prepared to leave the canyon that had been his prison for 127 hours, Aron took one last look at his severed arm, still trapped under the boulder. It was a surreal moment seeing a part of his own body that would remain in that canyon forever, a permanent reminder of the most extreme decision any human being can make. What happened next required almost as much courage and determination as the amputation itself. Aron Ralston, weak from blood loss, severe dehydration, and 5 days without food, had to hike and climb 7 miles through difficult terrain to reach his vehicle. With only his left arm functional and his right arm ending in a hastily bandaged stump, he began what would become one of the most epic rescue hikes in outdoor survival history. The journey out of the canyon required Aron to rappel down a 60-foot cliff face using only his left arm, a technical climbing maneuver that would be challenging for a healthy person with both arms, but nearly impossible for someone in Aron's condition. He had to rig his rappelling system differently than he ever had before, creating a setup that would allow him to control his descent with just one hand while managing the rope and his injured arm. As he made his way through the desert landscape toward his mountain bike, Aron's body was running on pure adrenaline and willpower. He was experiencing symptoms of severe dehydration, blood loss, and shock, but he forced himself to keep moving because he knew that stopping meant death. The desert sun was intense, and he had no water left, but he could see his goal ahead of him and refused to give up when he was so close to potential rescue. It was during this epic hike that Aron encountered the first human beings he had seen in 5 days. A family from the Netherlands, Eric and Monique Meijer, and their son Andy, were hiking in the area when they spotted a figure in the distance who appeared to be in distress. As they approached, they could hardly believe what they were seeing. A man with one arm, covered in dirt and dried blood, stumbling through the desert with a look of desperate determination. The family immediately recognized that this was a medical emergency of the highest order. They provided Aron with water, food, and most importantly, human contact and emotional support. Eric Meijer, who had some medical training, helped assess Aron's condition and realized that they needed to get him to professional medical help immediately. They also contacted authorities using their satellite communication device, setting in motion the rescue operation that would save Aron's life. The helicopter rescue that followed was dramatic and perfectly executed. The medical team that responded to the call was amazed that Aron was still conscious and coherent after what he had endured. His vital signs were critical. He was severely dehydrated, had lost significant amounts of blood, and was showing signs of kidney failure and infection. But his mental state was remarkably clear, and he was able to provide detailed information about his ordeal and his medical condition. The medical treatment that followed was extensive and complex. Aron required immediate surgery to clean and close his amputation site, massive fluid replacement to address his dehydration, and treatment for the various infections and complications that had developed during his 5 days trapped in the canyon. The doctors who treated him were amazed not just by his survival, but by the precision and effectiveness of his self-amputation. Despite using only a dull knife, Aron had managed to amputate his arm in a way that minimized damage to major blood vessels and created a clean wound that could be surgically repaired. The psychological recovery was equally remarkable. Rather than being traumatized by his experience, Aron seemed to be energized by it. He spoke openly about his ordeal, sharing details that helped medical professionals and survival experts understand the limits of human endurance. He also began planning his return to outdoor adventures, making it clear that losing his arm would not end his relationship with the wilderness that had nearly killed him. Aron Ralston's 127-hour ordeal in Blue John Canyon represents one of the most extreme examples of human survival instinct and determination ever documented. His story challenges our understanding of what people are capable of when facing impossible circumstances, and it raises profound questions about the relationship between physical survival and psychological strength. The decision to amputate his own arm was not made in a moment of panic or desperation. It was a calculated choice made by a man who had exhausted every other option and was determined to live. Aron's methodical approach to his own survival, his ability to maintain mental clarity under extreme stress, and his willingness to sacrifice part of his body to save his life demonstrate a level of courage that most people will never have to access. Today, Aron continues to be an active mountaineer and adventurer, using a prosthetic arm that allows him to climb, hike, and explore the wilderness he loves. He has become a motivational speaker, sharing his story with audiences around the world and inspiring people to push beyond their perceived limitations. His book, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, became a bestseller, and his story was adapted into the Academy Award-nominated film 127 Hours. But perhaps most importantly, Aron's experience has contributed to improvements in wilderness safety and rescue techniques. His detailed documentation of his survival methods, his psychological strategies for maintaining hope, and his frank discussion of the decision-making process that led to his self-amputation have provided valuable insights for rescue professionals and outdoor enthusiasts. What do you think about Aron's incredible story of survival and determination? Could you have made the same impossible decision he made on that fifth day? What aspect of his ordeal impressed you the most, his physical endurance, his mental strength, or his unwavering determination to survive? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and are always amazed by the different perspectives our viewers bring to these incredible stories. If this story of human courage and survival inspired you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that push the boundaries of what we think is possible. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest videos. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if Aron's story moved you. And if you found Aron Ralston's story of survival against impossible odds fascinating, you won't want to miss our next recommended video about another incredible person who faced death and refused to give up. Click on the video appearing on your screen now to continue exploring the amazing limits of human resilience and determination.